So where are you from, and kind of briefly-ish, where are your parents from?
Um, I feel like I'm from California because that's my whole memory, but I was actually born in Ely, Nevada, ELY, Nevada, but I came to California when I was 2 years old.
Mm.
And my mom is from Wyoming and Utah and was raised in a very Mormon household. And my dad uh, that raised me is from Israel, and it was a step parent adoption, so he's the only dad I know. But my biological dad, I guess, was from Wyoming,
Mm.
but I didn't know him growing up. I know him now, but I didn't know him growing up.
Yeah.
So he was a veteran, and he and my mom met when he came back from Vietnam, and she was holding a little like welcome vets sign when he got off the plane. That's how they met.
Here's the weirdos. Um, and then where do you remember growing up most of your life?
So when I was little, my parents were hippies in Berkeley, and then we lived in Oakland after that. But when I was real little, my dad was actually in college at UC Berkeley, and my mom studied art at Laney College. So they were college students when I was real little.
Did you ever meet Santana?
Reportedly, I did, and also Jefferson Airplane.
Oh, all of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right, huh?
I'm pretty sure that part's actually true because they lived in our apartment building, or their rehearsal space or whatever was in our apartment building before they were real famous.
That's wild. Where/how did you meet Dad?
I met him through friends. He was in an older kid group, and I was in high school, and he was kind of out of high school already, but a young adult, and just kind of hung in the music scene, but through friends of friends. But how we kind of started dating was I moved out of my parents' house, and he was renting a room in a mutual friend's house. He was like a boarder there, and I was not getting along with my parents, and my friend's mom said I could stay in that house till I could get my own place. So I was staying there temporarily, and we would sit on the couch and watch TV and not really talk a whole lot. And then one day he said, "You want to come see my band play Friday night?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then that was the end. After that, we were dating.
Where did you guys get together-ish? Like what town?
Menlo Park.
Okay. And then where did you get your first place together?
So we were dating while we were living in that house, and I didn't want the lady whose house it was to think ill of me, so I would sneak back to my room at night, and eventually she said, "I know you're dating, so why don't you just like move into his room so I could have that room back?" Which I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay." And then so I moved into his room for a while, and then he was helping me find a place of my own. And then he said, you know, I couldn't afford anything. I had a part-time job, and I was still in high school. And he said, we could get a place together, and then you could afford a better place. And I was like, you would leave this great situation and move out with me? And he was like, are you kidding? Yeah. And he really liked me, so we got a cute little cottage together.
Fun.
Yeah.
Why did you guys pick Paradise?
So after we graduated, for you, because after we graduated college,
and you picked Paradise? No.
we actually had a Sven had a little bit inheritance, and we were like, well, where do we want to try to buy a house? Because we had enough for a little down payment with it, but not in the Bay Area. And so we were like, where can we live where the home prices are a little cheaper? I wanted to have a horse. I had a horse, and I was
Jealous.
like, where can I live that's a little rural where I could have a horse, and where we could have some country living, but we wanted to live where it wasn't going to be too conservative. So we thought Chico had like a college town
Definitely.
atmosphere, so maybe there'd be some more liberal like ideology. And so Paradise was more rural but close to Chico. And how we found it was we went to Barnes and Noble. There was no internet back then, believe it or not. So we went to Barnes and Noble and we looked through a book called 50 Best Places to Retire in California. We wanted to stay in California, and it said Paradise, California. And I went, hey, that's right by Chico. I went to Chico once, and it was really beautiful, and it's got a college. And so we called up a real estate agent, and we drove up here, and she showed us 10 houses, and it was the first house we saw is the one we liked.
That's awesome. Okay. Like when I was born, do you feel like how do you feel like that affected your role in society?
In society? Okay.
Or even if it didn't at all, that's fine too.
It definitely did. Well, first of all, I didn't feel like I was connected really to the community up here before you were born. I didn't know anybody, and I didn't know how to know anybody. And after you were born, that was kind of how I started to like kind of meet people, you know, and make connections, but it also became weirdly like important to make connections, because like it became really important to me. Like I have to like I have to represent because I can't reflect badly for the sake of my kids.
What about like when you were a kid to teenage years for cultural events?
Cultural events? Well, I was just thinking about like being growing up female and just being born in the 70s, because I was born in 71. And so
the year the Eagles got together.
Really?
If you don't have the Silmarillion, you can look up a lot of stuff in the Silmarillion. It has a lot of references.
Like an encyclopedia.
Hi, Maria.
Hi.
I just said Maria. Mariah.
Oh, and also I meant to mention the whole history thing about my parents. I don't know if I told you ever that during World War II, my dad was in a Japanese concentration camp with his mom, with my grandma, your great grandma, and my grandfather was also in a concentration camp, but I think they separated the men and the women out, and that the kids stayed with the women. I can't swear to that, but I think that's the deal. And so I think that my dad was probably greatly affected by how that went. And I think people who've been through like seriously life challenging events like that, you know, like a war, they have a different perspective on life than the rest of us who've had it relatively easy. My dad was very no nonsense in a lot of ways, and he was not going to take shit from anybody. You know, maybe that was arrogance on his part, but I you know, I've known other people who've gone through traumatic stuff in wars and stuff, and they are want to say more hard nosed because not everybody's the same, but it seems like they're more willing to advocate for themselves. What was your other question?
I don't know if I had one.
Okay.
So, where were your parents from, and where were you from?
Mom was born in South Africa and grew up in South Africa, and Dad was born in Indonesia and spent part of his or maybe most of his childhood in Indonesia. Both South Africa and Indonesia were Dutch colonies, and so there were lots of Dutch in Indonesia and South Africa. That's where that connection came from. And then they somehow both traveled to Holland, and that's where they met. And I found this out from Mom like a week ago, that they met in a yoga class, and
I know they had yoga back then.
yeah, I didn't either. Well, yoga's been around forever, but I didn't know that Europeans were doing yoga.
Or calling it that.
Yeah. So Dad asked Mom out and to coffee, and then when they got there and like had coffee or whatever, he didn't have the money to pay for it. So that was their first date. And so I'm not really sure much about like how long they dated and stuff, but I was born in 1963 in The Hague in Holland, and I still have memories. We came over when I was 3, but I still have memories from being young there, and like I guess some people don't have memories from when they were really young, and I have some really specific ones that I remember that I think are kind of fun. Like my dad's best friend had a boxer dog that I really liked a lot, and a lot of dogs I guess don't like kids, but I guess I got lucky because I
don't think I was a mountain dog or anything like that, but it tolerated me pretty well. And my grandma had a dachshund that also tolerated me really well. I was really attached to that dog.
That's fun.
So that's Holland. And then we moved to the United States in 1965. And specifically, one big reason why we moved is in Holland they have mandatory military service, and my dad skipped out on that. So he didn't want to do it. I don't know why. It would have been no skin off his nose, but I guess he had other ideas, and so we moved to the U.S. And spent some time in the Bay Area, and apparently we lived in Canada for a little while, but I have zero memory of that. And then back to California, and I grew up in the Bay Area.
And then where did you meet Mom?
So in high school, we moved around a little bit. Like when I was younger, and when I finally started going to high school, we lived in Menlo Park, and Menlo Park is kind of an affluent area. We were not affluent, but my dad liked to be associated with the people who were affluent. So I went to school there, and graduated, and found a job in the Bay Area working at a restaurant. And after a few years of being out of school, I bumped into Mom, or not, didn't bump into Mom. My best friend introduced us, and I didn't really give it much thought. And then at some point, she ended up living in the same. I was renting a room from my best friend's mom, and Mom and I met or got together there. She moved in there too. She got in a fight with her parents and moved out, and that's where we met and we started hanging out.
When you guys first moved in together, how did you feel like you guys fit into America, or did you even feel like you were thinking of yourself in relation to America back then? Like, any thoughts on that?
No, we didn't have any thoughts on that. I'll back up a little bit and say that when I was growing up, my dad seemed really disdainful of Americans. He seemed to think he was smarter than Americans, and he didn't seem to think that Americans had any manners. And I don't think that necessarily rubbed off on me specifically. Like, I didn't look down on Americans at all, but I definitely, and I don't even know if you know, his attitude like was what rubbed off on me, but I was sort of, I don't know, arrogant is, I've been called arrogant before. So when I was, you know, when Mom and I were together, we were just kind of really hyper-focused on ourselves. And I didn't really have any thoughts about being an American one way or another.
Mm.
Other than
I live here.
I live here, and I think I skipped one election. I think I was disgusted with politics before I even knew what politics was, and I skipped an election, and then I started voting just because I
Gets chicks.
no no I started voting just because I started having some opinions about some stuff. I forgot to tell you. I'm sorry. I'm
Go
back.
for it.
Back up a little bit. When I was 12, we went to my great grandmother's 90th birthday in Holland, and so that's when I was naturalized. We needed to get me a passport, and so I was naturalized in San Francisco. Naturalization being that's when I got my U.S. citizenship. Just kind of skipped over that. And then we're back to you being born.
I'm just trying to like articulate how things might have changed with like your, maybe not your sense of identity, but like, because of course, you know, you went from just husband to father, or, you know, just partner to father.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obvious. Do you feel like my birth or Max's birth had a effect on your role in society? Or like,
I don't think anything I do in society like has any effect. I don't think society would notice if I'm there or not. I just feel that and I'll probably come back to this, the freedom that we have in the United States to do what we want, you know, to work at what we want, and to theoretically excel or not excel at what we want is pretty valuable. So like, I didn't have to, you know, worry about whether I was an American or whether I was, you know, Dutch or any of that. I was able to focus on my family without any governmental anything looking over my shoulder. And I know that some people don't have that kind of freedom.
yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of people don't have that kind of freedom, and it's easy to take for granted when you're here, but it's true. You know, when you brought up the idea of like, where do I fit in history of the United States and all that, a big part of it is
And not just like the United States, but like the history of it all, you know, like how it fits together. Sorry, go on.
No, that's okay. It's the big part of it is nobody cares what I do.
So, what were some of your hobbies as a kid?
I was in Boy Scouts up until I was like 16 or so, And that's when I got my Eagle Scout at 16. I was into like airsofting when I was in like middle school. When I was real little, we just kind of hung out in the goat yard. My brother and I, Max, just hung out in the goat yard and played with the animals and watched cartoons. We collected a lot of rocks, mostly just quartz and like serpentine from our yard.
That's cool. What were some of the big events from your childhood?
I remember a lot the first Obama election because my class did like a poll thing where you could bet on basically you could bet on which president you thought or candidate was going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked Obama because he had a red line versus all the other candidates had different colored lines. And that to me sealed the deal for him. Race wasn't even a part of the equation for me at the time. That just wasn't on my radar. And then I found out later, I was like, oh, he's our first black president, huh?
Yeah.
Big deal, I guess.
How do you...
Oh, and also the 2008 tsunami. Or if it was in 2008, it might have been 2012. I remember the Japan earthquake and tsunami was a really big deal. Just in my head, I remember it was really sad and tragic, and that was something I just remember. But speaking of 2008, I do remember also the 2008 Paradise Humboldt fire. It burnt down my garage, and we evacuated for like a week, and we lived at a friend's place for a little bit. And we left our house open, and firefighters stayed there.
Yeah. Do you feel that you were impacted by any of these events?
Maybe not super by the ones mentioned. I know you're always impacted by your president, but like not like directly did I feel impacted by that.
When you're 8 years old?
Yeah. And that's how old I was too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt really impacted by the 2008 fire. That was like the first fire that was on my radar really because, you know, it did directly impact me.
Yeah.
Moved out for a little bit. Lived at a friend's place for a bit. Burnt down our garage. When we came back in, the firefighters that had stayed there kind of made a huge mess inside with like McDonald's wrappers and stuff. And I kind of get like, you know, maybe fire so you're not worried about putting it in the trash. But we also opened up our home to you and left a sign up saying you could come in and use it, and you left it that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I go both ways. I actually have a scar from the 2008 fire. I won't mention where. It's on my...
Do you ever feel like you had a role in society growing up?
I had a really small scope of the world, I would say. It was really just like the Paradise Sphere for me. And like my friend group there was real small.
I would say many kids do when
Right.
you're a kid. You don't really know anything outside of your own life.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh my god, Japanese tsunami. Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Michael Jackson died. Who's he?
Yeah. How do you feel shaped by the events around you?
I would honestly say that I feel most shaped not by like the big events that you might see on the news, but just by my personal ones. Like specifically in school and in scouting. I feel very much affected by my personal relationships in those. And that those mostly molded me into who I am today. With that, I went through like a period where I didn't feel very connected to my friend group, or really anyone like my parents or anything. I had like a few friends I felt really close to, but it was like really that period that I feel shaped me the most. I would say I became really interested in politics because I felt like we could do better. And that also made me really cynical because we weren't doing better.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, come on, guys, like, what's the deal?
Yeah. Like, again, you're a kid and you're like,
Mhm.
you're the adults here.
Yeah, so high school is when I became the most cynical. I also feel like I became really smart in that era.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, just really cynical, and moving forward, I had to like unlearn some of the unhealthier habits and keep the ones that I liked from it.
Yeah. How do you feel different now compared to as a kid?
There's good and bad, you know? Like, I feel now I have a lot more responsibility. I have a girlfriend who I love, and that motivates me to succeed at work. I have two cats I love. That motivates me to succeed at work. Um, I'm in a band. That's a responsibility. Yeah, lots of responsibilities, but also a lot more freedoms. You know, you have the car and you have like time off, so you get to go do things you like. Like I really like to go fishing nowadays. Hang out with friends when I can, even though that sometimes you schedule it and that feels like a chore too. But
Yeah.
I'm tired a lot, but it's about moving forward and having goals to work towards.
How do you define yourself? It's a tough question.
Yeah. And you know, they always ask that in movies like who are you? And they're like I'm Leo, or I'm a eligibility work specialist. And they're like, "No, who are you?"
Yeah.
And it's like, "Well, how do you define yourself with like even sentences to a paragraph?" But I would define myself by what I like to do, who I spend my time with, and you know, your actions, of course. I like to fish a lot, like I said. I love to hang out with my friends. I love to just spend time with my girlfriend and really relax. I'm down for adventure too. I like to go camping and hiking. Um, I love to listen to music and play music. I'm in a band. Um, I work at the county. I'm still on probation. I spend time with my close friends. Sometimes I plan time for my family. Most of my time I'm with my best friend, Mariah, my girlfriend. Um, am I a cog in society? Yes. But I also am an individual. And I get to do my own thing and be my own person while also I do sometimes make a difference in the community, which is nice.
Yeah.
Um, I am America.
We are America.